our panelists and dive right in. Susan Shaner is the former administrator of the State of Hawaii's archives. She led the effort beginning in 2008 to establish a digital archive to preserve electronic records, both scanned and born digital. Born and raised in Oahu, Susan holds a Master's in Library and Information Science and a BA in Pacific Island Studies with an emphasis on Hawaii. Jason Achiu was born and raised in Honolulu and is a graduate of the University of Hawaiʻi. He is on staff at the Hawaiʻi State Archives as a translator, working primarily with Hawaiian language government records. He was formerly a Hawaiian language instructor at the University of Hawaiʻi, the Kamehameha School's Continuing Education Program, and the DOE Adult Education Program. Susan, Lawemekapena, you both come from the Hawaiʻi State Archives. Susan as a longtime archivist and then the State Archivist for 12 years, now retired, lucky you. Jason, or Kapena, as I and others know him, is a longtime translator there. How did each of you come to be involved with the project, and describe your involvement?
Susan, hi everybody. I'm really old. So I started back at the State Archives, and it would have been about 1976. And I wasn't even well, I got a paycheck, but I wasn't an official government employee at the time. I was on a grant program that they had going, a 2-year grant program. And I was hired to organize their photograph collection, all the ones that hadn't been organized yet, which were thousands of things. Okay.
Oh, so my involvement stems from that same Agnes Conrad, who was my boss when she was State Archivist. And one day she said, I have a new project for you to do. I want you to go through the diaries that are in the Hawaiʻi State Archives collection, the Queen's Diaries, and to excerpt every entry that is in the Hawaiian language and then do a translation of it. All I could do is what, we translators call a literal translation, which is just translating the words that are there without connection to like an event or the person. And she didn't explain what was the purpose of this project. So after I completed the entries from the State Archives diaries, then she gave me Xerox copies of only the Hawaiian entries that were from the diaries that are at Bishop Museum Archives. So then I did the same thing with those entries. I didn't have access to their diaries. I just had the Xerox copies of the entry in Hawaiian. And then later on, when David Forbes was doing the compilation of the diary transcriptions, he wanted to use my translations. So he would ask me, like when he couldn't understand or make sense of one of the translations, he would ask me like, well, why did I translate it like this? And then he would tell me, like, if it was related to a historical event, he would tell me about this event. So then I would say, oh, you're right. Then the translation would make more sense if it said this, then we would revise the translations. And so that's my involvement with the book project.
Another question to you, Susan. The title of the book is The Diaries of Queen Lilu'okalani of Hawaiʻi. Seems pretty straightforward. When I think of a diary, though, I think of deep, dark secrets and feelings that the diarist would only disclose to their very closest confidants, if at all. But that mostly doesn't seem to be the case with Lilu'o. How does she use her diaries, and why do you think that is?
I think she wasn't, well, I don't know how to put this. She wasn't a person that told secrets like that in a book. I really don't think she was. I think if there was something secret, she wouldn't put it in the diary. Let's put it that way. So I think she used the diaries as a journal, kind of, just, I don't know if it's to remind herself that she has to go to something the next day, or because often she wrote about something that might be happening the next day, or well, she was involved in just so many things, and she knew so many people that I think at times it might be hard to keep track of it. And it looked like, at least once a day they were doing something that had something to do with her being a princess and had, and that kind of thing. It does show that she has kind of normal activities. I mean, she has friends, they come and call, they go someplace else, they holo holo, they go, and they buy something or whatever. And that's fun, kind of. And you often run up against one of your ancestors' names. I did. So, then it becomes more personal. They were in there a couple of times, but there is just knowing the people she talked to. I mean, there were so many names of persons. After 1891, which is after Kalakaua died, then it became a little different. There was, sometimes she recalled people telling her that, they saw spies in some churches groups place. They thought they saw people. There were too many people where there shouldn't have been that many people. They were all guys. It looked like some of them might have had weapons, that kind of stuff. These little story things sort of crept into the diaries. And every time something was odd or somebody wanted to use her house, or you could tell it really had something to do with eventually the Queen's overthrow. And after that, then trying to get it back. But it wasn't very clear from the Queen's part. She'd say, somebody told me this. And then she wrote it down in her diary. She didn't necessarily say, I see this. Somebody else told her that she saw this. So it wasn't the Queen saying that she's actually doing it herself, but somebody else telling her about something they saw and they thought it was, not quite right.
So just from my own personal interests, I kind of found it interesting that she commented a lot about health issues related to her. And especially in 1898, she had some kind of sore on her neck that wouldn't heal. And so she had gone to a doctor there in Washington, D.C., who kind of characterized it as cancerous. So her 1898 diary, she says a lot about the treatments that she had to go through. And so just her commenting on her health issues was kind of interesting. The other thing was the breadth of her charitable works. All the Ali'iwa Hine Hawaii all seem to have this, I don't want to say mother instinct, but this obligation to look after the people's needs. And, this is from Queen Emma, Kili'ipauahi, Queen Kapiolani, all the princesses, Po'omaikilani, Liliu, they all felt this ali'i responsibility to the people. So in her diaries, Liliu writes a lot about her charitable works. She had an educational society, she had a savings club, she had a knitting society, she had a sewing society. So it's interesting that we can see her personal efforts. It's kind of unfortunate that, all the other ali'i wahine, they didn't keep diaries or entries to talk about their works, except, for their ultimate gift, like Kili Pawahi, the Kamehameha School's Bishop Estate. So those are the things that I found interesting.
beginning a bank for women, that was like way out there in that time. And because women didn't have any power over their own, if they were married or if they had a father, they didn't have power over their own money or their own property. And so the queen never gave up her ownership of her property or her, her cash or otherwise. She controlled it. John Thomas never controlled that, which was very unusual for that time.
And that's kind of what I love about this book, is that I feel like this is as close as I'll probably ever get to to Queen Lilu'okalani and her own words and her mana'o and just what her life was like during that time. It's an awesome window into her world in that way. There are a few questions already from the audience. If it's okay to jump into that, Roger Jelinek asks, why did she keep a journal?
I think she was trying to track her activity. I mean, she needed, and also she was a person who was dealing in real estate. So she was buying, selling, leasing, and all of that. Usually she talks about it peripherally in her journals by saying, I'm sitting here writing my accounts. And that would be in her. And so though that she's doing that with her accounts. So yeah.
Yeah. I kind of agree with David Forbes that these diary books, they are actually appointment books, and that her husband realized that she as princess had many appointments that she had to keep in the day. So these are actually appointment books, and she notates, what she did on that day so that she could remember what she did on that day, so that if she had to look back on what happened at such and such meeting, she could see what she did. So I think that's why she kept these. And then it kind of evolved when she got larger format books. It evolved into a journal type or diary type where we expect these kind of entries.
What is your personal image of the queen as a person, and how would you describe her?
Some entries show her as a very down-to-earth woman. Some entries show her feeling very fragile at certain times. And, it's just a beautiful connection to her as a person.
There's a lot about her love of children. I mean, that really comes across a lot. Aimoku is usually with her when she goes places, and then there's always somebody else that's with him. So, she really adopted him, and I think she certainly did a lot for other children. They pay the whole thing about the children's education was that she wanted them to be educated. She wanted them to be able to take over. I think she truly liked children.
I laughed when I read this simple entry. She had gone to Waikiki to go swimming in the ocean, and then she writes 11:30, lunched on manini and lipoa on the beach. There is no doubt in my mind that she caught the manini and she picked that lipoa that she ate, and that this meal was so ono to her that she wrote it down in the journal.
We know the queen was fluent in Olelo Hawaiʻi and English. Being born into an ali'i home in 1838, Olelo Hawaiʻi would have been her first language. Like so many other ali'i at the time, she was given a Western education for her from the time she was 4. You mentioned your involvement in the project. How much of her diaries is in Olelo Hawaiʻi?
Yeah, so most of her diaries, they are in English with a smaller percentage of entries are in Olelo, Hawaii. And I think this had to do again with the format of the diary books because they were so small. I think she chose to write in English because she could do abbreviations in English and she could also make shorter notes in English that she otherwise couldn't do if she wrote it in Hawaiian. However, later on when she did get larger format diary books, she does write more in Hawaiian, like her 1898 diary. A lot of her entries are in Hawaiian, and I think the 1906 diary. So it's due to the format of the diary that limited how she wrote.
What are some other things she chose to write in Olelo, Hawaii, and why do you think that is? Is there a certain rhyme or reason for that, you think?
Yeah, I don't think there's a uniform answer for that because sometimes she'll record like these mundane um, meeting notes that she took down at one of her meetings. She'll write that in Hawaiian and like there's no Hawaiian content to that. And so it's like, well, why is she writing this in Hawaiian? So in one particular diary, and we don't know why, so this was later, like way later after the overthrow, after the rebellion. This is way later. Like I want to say after 1900 maybe, she developed this fondness for code and she either adapted or she made up this own numerical code corresponding to the alphabet in the Hawaiian language. So all these coded entries, they're a researcher or a staff at Bishop Museum. Her name was Roberta Sprague. She is the one who broke the code. And that is how we know about the code and how we could transcribe the code into actual words to know what she wrote.
Mahalo. A mana'o from Yvonne Hunter. I think this was after your response, Ikapena. Very moving and altogether fascinating. And then from Toby Ruby, are they online somewhere so we can read them, or the English translations that have been done? Online, maybe is that the originals?
They still have, well, I think they've, Jason, do you know if they've scanned the diaries yet?
I think, yes, I think the diaries have been scanned and at some point will be posted on the State Archives website as a Liliu'okalani collection online kind of thing.
Yeah, I know we got extra money from Liliu'okalani Trust to do some of this stuff, some of that stuff. So yeah, okay, that's good. I'm glad.
Did you say when?
Pardon?
Did the Kapena say when it might be?
Oh no, we don't. I don't know the launch date yet.
You have to check the site.
Yeah, we started this a long time ago, way too long ago, and it's been difficult, partially because getting somebody to manage the project, they have to have a certain skill level, and the state doesn't pay for that kind of skill level, if you know what I mean. So you don't often get good people because you can't afford to get them. But anyway, pretty soon, I think it's going to come out. All they've been doing, well, a lot of what they've been doing is scanning the hell out of the stuff in the State Archives. It preserves it too, you know. There are people not necessarily having to turn the pages. You just get a digital copy. And it will help. It will help people to know what really is in the State Archives. So yeah, I can't wait.
I think most of us too feel the same.
Yeah, for sure.
I have some more questions here. There's ones I want to definitely make sure we get to, and then if we have more time, I'll go back to some other ones. So David W. Forbes is the editor and annotator of the Diaries. Susan, I understand you know Mr. Forbes very well. Can you tell us about him and his background and how this project came to be?
You know, he's always been somebody that's interested in history, especially Hawaiian history or Pacific Hawaiian history, because he did some work early on at the Historical Society. Was it the Historical Society? Yeah, I think so. No, it would have been the other side. Anyway, on other Pacific Islanders who traveled to Hawaii to help Hawaiians learn how to read and write in their own language. So if you have somebody that speaks Samoan, it's not too far from Hawaiian, and you could have a lot of words in common and stuff like that. So the missionaries here, there were already missionaries in other parts of the Pacific, and so people would volunteer to go back with them to here and help out in the process. Why did I go off on that tangent? I don't know. But David Forbes is a persevering researcher. He won't stop until he finds what he wants, or he'll do as much as he can and then he'll stop. But he wants to see, what he can find, because he treats this stuff as a puzzle, right? And he's trying to find the answers. And that's only good for us because we don't have to do it. We can just, get it at the end of the process, which is wonderful. But David himself, I found out he was 16 when he first came to the State Archives. And I think they were on summer break or something like that. And he didn't like the ocean. He didn't like swimming. His thing that was fun was trying to solve these puzzles. And he started with boxes in the State Archives building. And he's never stopped looking at the boxes in the State Archives building because there's so many of them. Anyway, he's actually been doing this, like, I would say 60 years and more, because I was trying to figure out, okay, he was 16 years old and now he's 80, I think. I'm not sure about that, but he's close to that. So he's been doing this, most of his life, besides other things. When he had to eat, then he'd go work somewhere and get money and then he'd go on, right? Different kind of person. I guess the thing I like about him is that he makes it he tells great stories and he makes connections between people. He treats the people of the 19th century like I do. I talk to them. I mean, I used to do this when I was still a working archivist. I mean, you go through somebody's papers and the person becomes part of you. You learn stuff about them. You think they're good or bad or fun or whatever. And David had that plus on plus on plus. He went through many more papers than I ever did. And he could tell, he'd be talking about somebody and you don't realize she's talking about somebody that lived, 100 years ago or whatever, just like they're still here alive walking around. And he can make connections between families. He goes, aren't you related? He tells me, aren't you related to blah, blah, blah. I go, how did you know that? I mean, it's kind of like, how did you know that? So I think he knows more about 19th century people than anybody ever will in Hawaii. I mean, I think he knows it more than anybody. That's why he's such a good person to be able to talk to about people and things, because he can often give you the answer or a way to get that answer. I mean, it doesn't matter that he's not Hawaiian. I mean, I think he's Hawaiian in his soul. I really do. I'm not in his person, but I think he is in his soul. And he really wants to finish.
Today, many of us still talk about Liliu'u as our queen, even though none of us were alive when she was still in power, or even before she died 24 years after the overthrow. Why do you think Liliu'u has that effect on us? And what of her nature or her spirit should we take with us as we look to our future as Hawaiians and as people of Hawaii?
You want to go first, Jason?
I think it's her spirit of perseverance. You know, her personal motto was onipa'a, which is to be firm in what you do, to be steadfast, to persevere. And she kept fighting for the restoration of the Hawaiian kingdom through whatever legal channel she could until all those channels were exhausted. That's just an example of her personal conviction, perseverance, and we can take that to heart in many issues today.
But you're right about her. She never gave up. She never gave up until, you're right, until absolutely when we became a territory, it was done. But and yet she kept on, and she left her trust to would you believe that W.O. Smith was the one who set up her trust? And other people asked him to do that because he was really good in financial matters. And her trust continues today.